Arcanum 15. The Devil. A spectre is haunting Europe. The spectre of communism. Meanwhile, we may add, the spectre has grown in stature and in power. Engendered by the will of the masses, born from the despair following the Industrial Revolution in Europe, nourished by the resentment accumulated amongst the masses through the generations, armoured with a dummy intellectuality which is Hegel's dialectic misconstrued, the spectre has grown and continues to make the rounds in Europe and in other continents. Today already, 1/3 of mankind is impelled to bow down before this God and to obey it in everything. What I am saying here concerning the generation of the most imposing modern egregore is in perfect accord with Marxist teaching itself. Because for Marxism there is no God or gods, there are only demons, in the sense of creations of the human will and imagination. This is the fundamental Marxist doctrine of the so-called ideological superstructure. According to this doctrine, it is the economic interest, that is, the will, which creates, that is, imagines, ideologies, religious, philosophical, social, and political. For Marxism, all religions are, therefore, only such ideological superstructures, that is, formations due to the human will and imagination. Marxism-Leninism itself is only an ideological superstructure, a product of intellectual imagination, on the basis of the will having arranged, or rearranged, social, political, and cultural things in a certain manner. And this method of production of ideological superstructures on the basis of the will is precisely what we understand by the collective generation of a demon or egregore. Now there is the Word, and there are egregores before whom humanity bows down. There is revelation of divine truth and the manifestation of the will of human beings. There is the cult of God and that of idols made by man. Is it not a diagnosis and prognosis of the whole history of the human race that at the same time that Moses received the revelation of the Word at the summit of the mountain, people at the foot of the mountain made and worshipped a golden calf? The Word and idols, revealed truth and ideological superstructures of the human will, operate simultaneously in the history of the human race. Has there been a single century when the servants of the Word have not had to confront the worshippers of idols, egregores? The 15th card of the tarot contains an important warning to all those who take magic seriously. It teaches that the magical arcanum of the generation of demons, and of the power that the latter have over those who have engendered them. We who have had experience of the demon or egregore in question above, and of the demon engendered by a collective will infatuated with national ambitions and making use of an imagination drawn from the province of biology, the National Socialist demon or egregore, know from first-hand experience what terrible power resides in our will and imagination, and what responsibility it entails for those who unleash it into the world. How true it is that he who sows the wind shall reap the whirlwind. We people of the 20th century know that the great pests of our time are the egregores of ideological superstructures which have cost humanity more life and suffering than the great epidemics of the Middle Ages. And having this knowledge, is it not time that we said to ourselves, let us be silent. Let us make our arbitrary will and imagination silent. Let us impose on them the discipline of silence. Is this not one of the 4 traditional rules of Hermeticism? To dare, to will, to know, to be silent. To be silent is more than to keep things secret. It is more even than to guard oneself from profaning the holy things to which a respectful silence is owed. To be silent is, above all, the great magical commandment of not engendering demons through our arbitrary will and imagination. It is the task of silencing arbitrary will and imagination. Let us resign ourselves, therefore, to the great work of contributing constructively to tradition, the spiritual Christian Hermetic scientific tradition. Let us thoroughly immerse ourselves in it. Let us study it. Let us practice it. Lastly, let us cultivate it. That is, let us work not in order to overthrow, but in order to build. Let us range ourselves amongst the builders of the great cathedral of mankind's spiritual tradition, and let us try to contribute to it. May the Holy Scriptures be holy for us. May the sacraments be sacraments for us. May the hierarchy of spiritual authority be the hierarchy of authority for us. And may the perennial philosophy, and also truly scientific science, of the past and present have friends in us, and, should it be the case, respectful collaborators. This is what the commandment to be silent entails. The commandment of not engendering demons. Now it is always excess owing to intoxication of the will and imagination which engenders demons. If, to return to the example cited above, Marx and Engels had simply defended the interests of the industrial workers without having let themselves be carried away by their intoxicated imagination to make statements of universal historical significance and even cosmic significance, such as the statement that God does not exist, that all religion is only the opium of the people, that all ideology is only a superstructure on the basis of material interests, and that this has always been so everywhere, they would have been contributors to tradition. Because care for the rights and well-being of the poor is an integral part of the very essence of tradition, Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu, and humanist. Carried away by indignation, not devoid of a nobility of heart, and by the bitterness of disenchantment with the classes in power, not devoid of a foundation in experience, they cast in the same mould God, the bourgeoisie, the gospels, capitalism, mendicant orders, industrial monopolies, idealistic philosophers, and bankers. And they declared all this without a second thought, as a riffraff of the history of the human race. There is no doubt that with them it was a matter of an excess, a going beyond the limits of competence and sober and honest knowledge, which they did not in any way doubt, having been carried away by the intoxicating impulse of radicalism, that is, by a fever of the will and imagination to change everything utterly at a single stroke. And it is this fever of desire to change everything utterly at a single stroke which gave birth to the demon of class hatred, atheism, disdain for the past, and material interest being placed above all else, which is now making the rounds in the world. This demon is being heroically combated at present, 1963, by the head of a large communist country, who is doing all that is humanly possible to replace it by a spirit of care for the people and for their well-being, the spirit which underlies the work of the sober Marx and Engels, that is, taken into the framework of tradition, not exceeding either their competence or the limits of the cause itself. To be silent is the temperance of the 14th Arcanum of the Tarot, opposed to the intoxication whose essence and dangers are revealed by the 15th Arcanum. The inspiration of temperance can be turned into the intoxication of the devil. The inspiration aiming at alleviating the lot of the poor and oppressed, and at re-establishing social justice, is able, as was the case with Marx and Engels, to change into the intoxication of radicalism, that is, to become feverish will and imagination, desiring to change everything utterly at a single stroke. This is the relationship between the inspiration of the angel of the 14th Arcanum and the generation of the demon of the 15th. The history of the human race supplies us with numerous examples of the transformation of the initial inspiration of temperance into the subsequent intoxication, generating demons. It is the relationship between the 14th Arcanum and the 15th which explains how the religion of love was able to give way to the funeral pyres of the Inquisition, how the idea of hierarchical collaboration within mankind became a caste system, or rather, the struggle between the classes, how the scientific method was transformed into materialistic dogma, and how, lastly, the facts of biological evolution were used as a basis for the doctrine of intrinsic inequality between races and the corresponding superiority of certain nations. The list is in no way complete, but it suffices to show the practical significance of the relationship between the 14th and 15th Arcana of the Tarot. It is the relationship between inspiration and counter-inspiration.